Welcome to Coach Bennett's podcast, where every run has a purpose, where kindness is hardcore, where this is about running, and this is not about running, where every starting line is a finish line in disguise, where rambling still gets you where you need to be, where pineapple will never ruin your pizza, and the sodas, adult and not adult kind, are always cold, and where there is room on the starting line for everybody. I'm Coach Bennett. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 108 of Coach Bennett's podcast. That's right, 108. And this one is either entitled How to Slow Down So You Can Speed Up, or simply How to Slow Down. I'm currently debating what I should call this episode, because parts of me wants you to realize, like, look, this is a conversation about how you can get faster. But part of me also just wants to kind of be a little bit sneaky and have an episode entitled How to Slow Down, which may beg the question of why would you want to slow down, but I'm also not really talking about how to slow down in the bigger picture. It's just how you can slow down in your training, certain aspects of your training, so certain aspects of your training can be done better because you're actually doing things the right way. So I'm not quite sure what we're going to call this, and at this point, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all because you're already listening to it and it's already been published, so it's either how to slow down or how to slow down so you can speed up. Now, a few years ago, I did a guided run with Andy Puttycombe of Headspace called Slow Down to Speed Up, and it was actually a speed run. So that one was very popular because we went over some of the concepts that we're going to be talking about today, but also it was a fun speed run. So there was that. But that's not what inspired this. What inspired this was some conversations I had while I was sitting in the crowd at the NCAA Track and Field Championships a few weeks ago at Hayward Field at the University of Oregon. And I was sitting with some athletes that I used to run with when I competed for the Nike Farm Team. And, you know, you're just talking, and I haven't seen some of these athletes in a long time. So we were catching up, and then we're talking about the races, and then we started talking about some of the races that we had run, and I threw out a question to a couple of them, and I said, if you could change one thing, only one thing, not two things, not three things, not four small things, one aspect of your training that you believe now, looking back, would have helped you run faster, what would it be? And I'm not kidding. Across the board, it was the same answer. It was back off, run easier. And it usually was backing off on the recovery runs, but a lot of times it was backing off on the speed runs as well. It was this idea, and it was universal, that we had all run too hard when we should have just been backing off, which is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Not that we said that, the fact that we all said it as our first answer. And it got me thinking, you know, I get lots of questions of, well, you know, I tried to do this run and I couldn't do it. And we're not talking about speed runs. It's interesting. People don't write me and say I couldn't do the speed run. It's usually I couldn't finish an easy run, a recovery run. And that got me thinking, okay, I think we need to talk about this again. And yeah, we're going to be talking about this forever because it's forever going to be a problem, right? And I think that's just something that we have to acknowledge, that this is going to be, if not the number one problem, it's going to be one of the biggest problems that runners have, especially new runners. But judging from these questions and the answers that I was getting from asking this question of what's one thing that you would change. Look, these were at the time, we're talking about athletes that were 24, 25, 26, that had qualified for national championships, that had qualified for the Olympics, some of them. And what they were coming back with was not, well, I wish I added more of this, or I wish I had run this aspect of my training harder, or done more strength training, all of which, by the way, may have helped them improve. Okay, so remember, this isn't the only thing. I just said, what's the one thing, if you could, that you would change? Which is super important. Because as I was just kind of referring to, like, there's lots of things you can do to get better. There's always lots of things you can do better. I mean, you can get more sleep. You can hydrate better. You can party less, right? You can have more fun. You can take some of the training more seriously. You can run in groups more. You can add the strength training. You can really focus on the drills. All sorts of things that you could have done to get better, and yet the number one thing that kept being said over and over again was, I would have slowed down. And that's what would have helped me speed up the most. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how to slow down. Now, before I start, this isn't just about athletes that are trying to qualify for national championships and world championships. The same things that work for them work for you. And the same things that work for you work for them. So this is for everybody. This is for everybody. And I'll tell you what, because I hear from people that say, I tried to do, let's say this 20-minute easy run, and I've never run for 20 minutes before, and I couldn't do it. I got, to 6 minutes, I was totally out of breath. I couldn't keep running that hard. And it's like, okay, well, let's rewind here. It's because you're running hard. It's because you're running hard. You're running too hard. So it's important to just foundationally say here and now. Remember, the difference between running and walking is not pace, it's flight. It's the fact that you're taking flight. With walking, there's always one foot on the ground. With running, brief periods of flight. That's it. You could, if you could, clone yourself, and one version of you is going for a nice, powerful walk, and you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to go out there. I can walk like this for 20 or 30 minutes. Fine. You could literally have the athlete next to you, the cloned athlete version of you next to you, run at that exact same pace. Now, there are going to be differences in energy output because taking flight is going to require and demand certain actions and a certain amount of effort that is above and beyond what's happening on the walk, but it's not so dramatic that you can't do it unless you're running too hard. So you can back off, okay? You can back off. And again, this doesn't have to be a 20-minute run. It can be a 5-minute run. It can be a 2-minute run. The concept's the same. It's our ego that gets in the way. It's our drive that gets in the way. It's our work ethic that gets in the way. It's our expectations of ourselves that gets in the way. And I'm not, bashing these different parts of us. What I'm saying is that a lot of times we put so much pressure on ourselves. We demand so much of ourselves that it's very hard to do the right thing because we equate the right thing with backing off, being soft, being weak, when it's the smart thing to do. And the smart thing to do, when it's the right thing to do, is the best thing to do. So you're being your best when you're running the right way. Just wanted to give that. So here are some ways where you can slow down. Here are some ways on how to slow down. All right, first and foremost, you've heard me say every run has a purpose. So my number one thing is going to be remember the purpose. Remember the purpose. Remember the purpose. That's right, I said it 3 times in a row, which means it's got to be important, or something's going on and I just keep forgetting that I said it the first time, which is not the case because I told you I said it 3 times, so I must be saying it 3 times for a reason, and I'm trying to accentuate the point, which is remember the purpose the 4th time I've said it now. Now, what does that mean? Well, think about what the purpose of a run is before you go and do it. What is the purpose of an easy run? What is the purpose of this recovery run? Literally, just go through it in your mind before you start the run. If we just did that and asked ourselves, how are we feeling? Just those 2 things. What's the purpose of the run? How am I feeling? We would keep ourselves out of so much trouble in our training. But too often, we don't ask ourselves how we're feeling, and we don't actually take the time to really think about, why am I doing this run? What is the purpose of the run? Is the purpose of this easy run to physically struggle? No. It's not. It never is. Now, that doesn't mean there might not be a mental struggle, a mindful struggle. Maybe you're stressed out from the day. Maybe you're in this period of training, which I like to call the desert, where you're low on inspiration, you're low on motivation. So yeah, maybe emotionally, mindfully, mentally, spiritually, this run is going to be a struggle fest. Okay, I get it. And there are ways you can work on that. But I'm talking about physically, it should not be a struggle, which means you have the capability, the ability to adjust the run. So at least from a physical standpoint, it is not an intense physical struggle, which means you're probably going to have to back off. If you're physically struggling, you need to back off. If you're physically struggling, you need to slow down. I don't like using the term slow down, and I try not to. In a lot of ways, I'm trying to figure out like synonyms, other ways of saying slow down, because I know that when you tell a runner to slow down, they immediately think of a whole series of negative things. It's just how it is. Oh, slow down. I mean, he thinks I can't do this. That's not why I'm telling you to slow down. Slow down. Oh, it's too fast for me, which means I'm not enough. That's not why we're doing that. That's not why we're doing that. Like, if you want to go to an extreme point of view here, why don't you try to run your fastest all the time? Like, if that's what, you want to just take this out, like, to from a logical point of view to then an illogical point of view. Well, if the way to get better is to always be running super, super hard, super fast, struggling all the time, why don't you just race every single day for as long as you can go until you've got nothing left? And then tomorrow, do the same thing. Let's see how much better you get that way. Obviously, anyone listening to this, anyone that's been running, knows that's stupid. That makes no sense. Okay, well then, why would slowing down when you've now removed the actual purpose of the run and you're doing something totally different? It's a recovery run. It's an easy run. You're no longer running easy. You're no longer recovering in any way, shape, or form. Why would you do that? It's akin to saying just run hard all the time. I mean, if you're going to just pick and choose when to do the right thing, you're just inconsistently training. That's what you're doing. You may be consistently running, but you're inconsistently running the right way, which is the same as just running the wrong way. You have to consistently run the right way if you want to get consistently great results, right? Or even consistently good results, or even consistently okay results. But if you are looking to improve, be smart, do the right thing. And sometimes what that means is backing off, slowing down. And you'll know when to do that if you just ground yourself in the purpose of the run. If you're doing a tempo run and you start to struggle, well, you don't need to panic. Part of a tempo run's purpose is to get you to a point where you're uncomfortable, where you are struggling a little bit, and not just physically. Yes, you're struggling a little bit to focus, maintain the pace, keep a good mindset. All of these things are part of the tempo run. But when you're doing an easier recovery run, you shouldn't be out there physically struggling. What that means is you're fatigued for any number of different reasons. As a result, what's the purpose of the run? Not to make you even more fatigued so you're in even worse position tomorrow. Remember, the running purpose of a recovery run is to recover from a hard effort or in anticipation of a hard effort so you can take on that hard effort as best as you can. That's the purpose. Yes, you're building endurance. Yes, you're gaining fitness, but you're also allowing your body to soak up work it's done and be prepared to take on what's next. So remember the purpose of the run. And one way that you can make sure you're running with the right purpose is once you've thought of and acknowledged the purpose is lead with effort. What is the effort I'm supposed to be giving? I gave you two examples of a recovery run and a tempo run. Well, the tempo run is going to be uncomfortable, right? It's not all out, but it is uncomfortable. So if you have an effort, you're like, oh, this is annoying, but I can keep doing it, you're probably right around the right pace. Now, if you're on a recovery run, and you're like, oh, this is a really annoying pace. I can keep doing it. I can't keep doing it for, a really long time, but I can do it for a little bit. Like, that's too hard. That's just too hard. Focus on your effort. Is your effort matching the purpose of the run? So if you know the purpose, now you can find the effort. And sometimes the effort's kind of disguising itself as early morning sluggishness or post-work fatigue. And eventually, once you've been leading with the correct effort, that stuff just kind of falls off. And suddenly you're like, oh, I feel a lot better. But you're not going to find that or get rid of the sluggishness or that kind of almost, I'm not going to call it fake fatigue, but kind of maybe that light fatigue that can dissipate sometimes over the course of a well-run run. You're not going to be able to do that if you're not leading with the right effort to match the purpose. If you're grinding, you're not going to find the right pace. You're not. And the pace is a reflection of the effort. That's what it is. Okay? That's what it is. The effort is not always a reflection of the pace. Okay? That's a mouthful, but you can always press pause and rewind and look at it. So lead with effort. Remember the purpose of the run, and then lead with effort. Okay? Lead with effort. Ignore the metrics is my next one. Ignore the metrics, especially early in a run. Ignore the metrics. A lot of times we'll say, well, I've been running for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and my recovery run paces are generally around this pace. Great. I understand that. Okay. But when you are doing a recovery run, if you know the purpose and you lead with effort, you don't need to be looking at that pace really at all. I mean, if you want to, go ahead. But you technically you don't have to. By the end of it, if you've been paying attention to your body, if you've consistently been having these conversations with your body run after run, you should know your body. And that's going to lead to you running the run you need to run, which will lead to the correct effort being given, which will lead to the correct paces being run. So you can ignore the metrics. And I just want to, sneak in here too. All metrics demand context, all of them. So if you're overly focused on the metrics and not focused on the context of what's going on in the runner's life and where the runner is running, the environment that the runner is running in, the weather conditions, things like that, then the metrics are useless. They're totally useless. And if you're relying on GPS, remember, GPS giveth and taketh away. So sometimes the GPS isn't even correct. So you're getting upset on a run based on metrics that you're getting from a satellite a couple miles into the sky that's doing its best to give you, metrics that are close to real. But I'll just give you a little insight into how we measured runs back in the day. Oh, I feel like I should have like a corncob pipe, and I should be sitting in like a rocking chair, and I've got like a cold lemonade and maybe some suspenders on, and I'm just like, Old Man Johnson or something like that as I talk like this. But the point is, when we would go for recovery runs, we didn't have GPS watches. We just had like little cheap $35, $25 watches that you press start, you press stop, and at the end you had a duration, and then we just kind of sort of figured out it was about-ish long. I mean, we didn't know. And from that, you would kind of judge what the pace probably was for the most part. And if you were lucky, this was a loop that you did fairly consistently, so you could compare it to other times you did the loop and how you felt, and which meant you had to have a running log. So by the way, here it is, your almost daily reminder to have a running log. All right? So when you're ignoring the metrics, that doesn't mean you're ignoring your effort, and it doesn't mean you're ignoring the purpose of the run. So when I say things like ignore the metrics, that doesn't mean you're not paying attention to important things. You're focusing on your effort, and you have as context what is the purpose of the run, and you're bringing in other things, right? It's super hot, it's super humid, it's an easy run. All right, what's the effort? Okay, does that match the purpose of the run? Great, wonderful. At the end, you can keep a running log. Make sure you're putting in the distance the duration, as well as that context that is demanded. It was hot. It was humid. I was alone. I had a long day at work. Whatever. You want that in there. Without it, you look back and guess what? It's just a bunch of numbers that are pretty close to meaningless. All it's telling you is that this run took this long and I went this far. But without the context, from a coaching point of view, it's pretty close to worthless. All right? So ignore the metrics. All right? Which is going to be confusing to remember, maybe because the next one here is pay attention to the metrics. Yeah, pay attention to the metrics. So like I told you, if you're keeping a running log, even when you've ignored the metrics, you're writing down how long the run was. You're probably writing down what your pace was, right? I mean, if you have a GPS or if you're just trying to figure it out, that's cool. And you're also paying attention to how did you feel? That's a metric. See, that's a metric on the run for me as a coach. How did you feel before? How did you feel during? How did you recover after? Those are all valuable metrics to me as a coach when you tell me about your run. What is the weather like? Well, the temperature is a metric. I would like to know. What's the humidity like? I would like to know. What was the route that you ran on? Was there a ton of elevation gain? Was it a lot of downhills? I want to know these things because they're important. They're important for me to contextualize what exactly we were trying to do and who you were as an athlete on the starting line, who you were as an athlete during the run, and who you are now as an athlete because of the run. And now we're into this recovery phase for the next one. So yeah, pay attention to the metrics. I think I've told you this before. When I was coaching high school, I would have the athletes, every single athlete on the team had to log in on an online running log and let me know how the run went. And there was color coding. So if you had on, let's say this date, I ran 6 miles or I ran 10K and it was a blue, it meant everything was great. I felt fine, felt good. The effort that was being asked, I matched, and I matched it with the right kind of effort. So if you were asking for an easy effort, okay, well, I was able to give an easy effort and achieve the goal of the run. Perfect. Blue, terrific. If it's orange or red, we're skewing towards, it was supposed to be an easy run. It never felt easy. I even backed off and it still felt hard. And if I see a couple of those together, I realize, we got to really be careful here because this is an athlete that's fatigued, tired, potentially exhausted. And what we normally do to recover, where we run our easy runs at this certain pace for this certain distance, well, that's not enough. We're going to have to do something to help this athlete recover beyond what we normally do. It's called adjustment. It's called adjusting. That's coaching. So that's why paying attention to the metrics is also important. Not paying attention to the metrics so you can beat yourself up. It's paying attention to the metrics so you can learn more about yourself, so you feel more confident when you're making adjustments. So pay attention to the metrics in a way that you're learning about the runner and learning about the running. And like I said, that should help you be more confident in the runner and in the running you're doing, which leads me to the next one, which is be confident in the training, which is not always an easy thing to do. Be confident in the training. I'll tell you what, when I tell athletes they should back off, it's much harder for the athlete to come to terms with that than it is compared to when I tell an athlete, okay, we need to do more. Athletes, for whatever reason, they're much quicker in believing that's the right course of action. We should do more. We should push more. We should run more. More intensity, more volume, more minutes, more meters, more miles, more speed. Yes, this computes. It makes sense. The second you tell an athlete, hey, for us to get better, we're going to need to back off. For us to get better, we're going to have to take a day off or days off. For us to get better, we're going to have to back off the pace, back off the distance, back off the duration. For us to get faster, we're going to need to slow things down a little bit. Really hard for that to compute with an athlete many times. And I get it. I understand. As athletes, we're kind of taught like more is better, harder is better, grit, yeah. I understand it. But if you really want to get good, you need to understand that slowing down in the short term is sometimes the best way to speed up in the long term. To back off the distance is what's going to allow you to go further in the future. I know, crazy. But if you want to visualize it, I think it's important to remember that even when you are backing off, even when you are taking some of the minutes off your weekly volume or the meters off your weekly volume or the miles off your weekly volume, you're still moving forward. You're still moving forward. So it's just an important thing to know. And recovery is part of training. Healing is a sign of progression. So when you're incorporating that into your training, which you have to, because great running is dependent on great recovery, then you're moving forward even when you're not running. All right? So it's just important to remember, be confident in the training. And a lot of times athletes, again, think more is better, but they don't realize that to be confident in your training is the same thing as being confident in yourself. It's acknowledging what you've already done. It's not about what you're about to do. Being confident is acknowledging, I've put the training in, okay? Right now I may be a little fatigued. So the best thing to do is to respect the work I've done. That's being confident in your training, because that leads to better decisions about what's next. But first, you have to respect what you've done. What have you done to get here? How are you feeling here? What's the next move? So be confident in your training, which leads me to, I think this could be kind of, two parts to the same thing, but whatever, which is believe you can do hard things. Now, the reason why I have that in here is because for the last couple of minutes, I've been talking about how hard it is for athletes sometimes to back off, to slow down. So believe you can do hard things. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is the easiest thing to do. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to back off, is to stop struggling so much. Sometimes the greatest struggle is to allow yourself not to struggle. I'm sure you've heard it from me and from other coaches and from other athletes about, tempo runs are about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I love that. So true. But so much of great running is about getting comfortable with simply being comfortable. So many runners think it's always supposed to be hard. It's not. It's rarely supposed to be really difficult. There are times when it's supposed to be. You're supposed to struggle. Sometimes it's a physical struggle. Sometimes it's a mental or mindful struggle. Yes, those aspects are in there. Sometimes, even when it's not easy, it's not so easy. But the point is, if you can get comfortable with being comfortable when you're supposed to be comfortable, there's a better chance you're going to be able to nail things when the time comes to be uncomfortable. And you'll be comfortable with that as well, because you're going to understand, okay, here it is. Here's the struggle. I've run to it. The purpose of this right now is to struggle. Bring it. I'm not afraid of achieving the purpose of a run. And sometimes it's not easy to achieve the purpose of a run. We always think the hard thing is doing the hard stuff. And what we equate with the hard stuff is running hard. Oh, running is so tough, because, it's so hard to run long. It's so hard to run fast. Listen, I wish that was the hardest part of running. But from what I've seen, the hardest part of running is running the right way, period, full stop. And what that also includes, beyond running hard when you're supposed to run hard, is running easy when you're supposed to run easy. Backing off when you're supposed to back off. That's what keeps people from achieving their goals, I think, more than anything else. I do not have as difficult a time convincing athletes to push and run hard as I do to convince athletes to back off, to run easy when they're supposed to run easy, or to run super easy when easy isn't easy enough. Isn't that wild? It's wild. So believe you can do hard things. But don't limit that to just the fast stuff and the long stuff. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is just the right thing. And sometimes the right thing to do is to just run easy, which we equate with, well, that should be easy. No, not always. Sometimes the hardest thing to do makes everything else easier. And sometimes the easiest thing to do makes everything else harder. And you can see that where some athletes, the easy thing to do is just to keep pushing. That's what they know. The hard thing to do is to deal with it mentally, in a confidence point of view, all of that, of just backing off and not losing faith in yourself, not losing faith in the training, becoming more confident because you're doing the right thing. So don't assume that the hard thing to do is always the hardest running. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is the easiest running. All right? So believe you can do hard things. That's one way you're going to be able to slow down so you can speed up. And then lastly, if you want to know how to slow down and you're struggling with slowing down, blame me. Just blame me for it. When you go out on a run, you're like, I can't believe I'm running this slow. This is so weak. And you're dealing with all this stuff that is nonsense. But guess what? We deal with nonsense in our heads all the time. We talk nonsense to ourselves all the time. We lie to ourselves more than anyone else. All of this stuff is constantly going on. So if you have that antagonistic voice in your head and maybe you're not ready to deal with it, I'll deal with it. Let that voice blame me. Coach Bennett sucks. He's making me run so slow. He's making me take it easy. I would run harder, but whatever. You can throw me under the bus. It doesn't matter. You can trash me. You can yell all sorts of nasty things to me. It's fine. I'm okay with it. I get it. My job is to help you. My job is to serve the athlete, period. If it's going to get you to do the right thing, yeah, you can trash me. Blame me. Blame me for why you're running so slow, why you're running so easy, why you're running so few minutes, meters, or miles today when you could go longer, but Coach Bennett's not letting me. That's fine. If you want to blame me for you doing the right thing, I'm 100% okay with that, because what's going to happen is if you consistently do the right thing, you're going to start running the way you really want to. And then it's interesting. You'll stop blaming me and you'll just start crediting yourself, which is fine too. It's interesting. You go from trashing me to then running really well. And then you're like, I don't need you. I'm going to demote you. You're now the assistant coach, which is the goal anyway. So I'm fine with that. Trash me and then fire me. It's all good. It works. So there you go. How to slow down so you can speed up. Remember the purpose. Lead with effort. Ignore the metrics. Pay attention to the metrics. Be confident in the training. Believe you can do hard things. And if all else fails, just blame me for slowing down when you need to back off. I'm cool with it. All right? So there you go. Episode 108. If you could, I would love for you to follow me on whatever platform that you're listening. I would love for you to share the podcast if you could. If you haven't already rated or reviewed the podcast, especially on some of those major platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, or I guess it would be Apple Podcasts. Anyway, the point is, I would love for you to do it. Thank you for being a part of this community. Thank you for running. Thank you for sharing some of your day with me. Now, go take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I'll meet you on the next starting line. Thank you so much for listening to Coach Bennett's podcast today. And if you haven't already subscribed or set yourself as a follower to the podcast, I really hope you would. And make sure you check out the show notes, because in those show notes, you're going to find a link to Coach Bennett's newsletter and all the social media sites I'm on, like Instagram and Threads and Cameo and Blue Sky and Nope, not on that one anymore. So all the ones I am on, you're going to find it in the show notes, so check that out as well. And as always, thank you again for listening to Coach Bennett's podcast. Until next time, you keep taking care of yourself and each other.